There was always a huge amount of emphasis during my childhood on education. I was supposed to be studying all the time. Of course, got enough time to play. The big change came when my father got transferred abroad, and that's when I suddenly realized that what I've learned is not what how I'm supposed to learn. The way science was taught was literally inside the lab. There was a physics lab, a chemistry lab, a bio lab, and everything that you learned in science would typically start off with an experiment. The teacher would ask, why did this happen? I still recall watching a movie, Superman, and in that movie, he travels faster than light and, time moves backwards. And I remember going up to my physics teacher a few days later and asking him, how did he do that? It made him realize I was interested, and he sat back after class one day and explained in very rudimentary science the concept of relativity. And I remember asking, what is JEE? And the guy stared at me, and then he very patiently explained. And then I asked, what is IIT?
Let me kick off, Manish, what we do, and as we had spoken earlier, that it's always, great for some of the youngsters who will be listening to this. They're always, at the start of their professional journey. And when they hear achievers like you, it's always nice to hear that, where you started and how you started. So, just tell us a little about your student life. Even before you get onto your professional life, just give us a little glimpse into your student life.
Okay, that's an interesting place to start off. So, I have studied in 6 different schools actually.
Mhm.
And so if I and I have lived in multiple locations. My father was in the government service. Both my parents come from very small towns, villages, if you insist, in UP. And therefore, I started my education in Mumbai, studied here for a year. My father was transferred to Delhi, studied again in another school for a year. Perhaps the longest stint that I had was at Xavier's from second grade to sixth grade, Xavier's in Delhi. And my father was then posted abroad. And so, two things that I remember from that time is that A, there was always a huge amount of emphasis during my childhood on education, on studies. I was supposed to be studying all the time. Of course, got enough time to play, would look forward to it. Uh, Even if it was raining, couldn't play cricket, which was my usual sport. There was a library nearby, would go there and read books. Uh, so cricket, table tennis, mental puzzles, these are things that I was very
Wow.
used to. Huge fan of Sunil Gavaskar, Vishwanath, Kapil Dev. Uh, the big change came when my father got transferred abroad for a few years, and that's when I suddenly realized that uh, what I've learned is not what how I'm supposed to learn. And
Mhm.
while even in the first, up to the sixth grade, I had changed 2 boards already. The concept of boards was something that was not familiar to me. So if there was a change in the way a third board got introduced to me, even that didn't feel jarring. You went to class, somebody was explaining something interesting, and you would try and understand what they were explaining. And but when I look back and reflect in hindsight, and now that I'm in education, one of the big things that I realize is there was no, so for example, when I was in Xavier's, there was something called mental maths. We would literally have to remember tables. There were quick questions that the maths teacher would give, and 10 questions to be answered at the beginning of every class in a span of literally 100 seconds. Those are things that went completely out of the window. We were actually being forced to think. Uh, in an international school, uh, and I was studying in a British school, the the way science was taught was literally inside the lab. There was a physics lab, a chemistry lab, a bio lab, And everything that you learned in science would typically start off with an experiment. And then the teacher would ask, why did this happen? So, for example, the concept of molecules, I had already become familiar with it because I had passed sixth grade. But that was explained to my uh, fellow students in grade 7 or towards the end of grade 7. And the teacher one day did an experiment, took a beaker full of water, poured a spoon of salt in it, and asked everybody, why did the water not spill over? Where did the salt go? And it took a series of 1.5 hour sessions before the team. And he realized very quickly that I was on to what was happening. He just made me stay mum. And over a period of 4.5 hours during the week, everybody started discussing what could have happened. And, are there particles of water? Why are they not visible? Are there particles of salt? And that's how everybody learnt that there is something called a molecule. This was the typical way in which science was taught. You know, if you talk about, let's say, Newton's laws, they would do an experiment and then they would ask you, why did the mass get, the acceleration get transferred from one body to another? What happens if this body was twice the size, which is Newton's second law? So it was a new way of thinking. And while I was already, I came from a very adaptive approach because I had changed a lot of schools. One of the things that I realized is and got interested in is the how of things. Instead of taking things on face value, I started myself starting to question, and I became extremely interested in natural sciences. Of course, another facet of education there was uh, a lot of focus on 360-degree education. So languages, I learned French, I learned Cantonese. I would actually struggle with Hindi because my parents didn't want me to lose touch with Hindi. I learned martial arts, computers. I actually toyed with the first version of the Apple II computers in 78. Played basketball, table tennis, did well, won some awards, learned musical instruments, swimming, woodwork, cooking, you name it, and we did it. And so that's the memory of the best part of my formative years. Came back, struggled a little bit because I came back literally alone, had to go on my own into the nearest central school. My parents had not come back with me and get myself admitted. Struggled with uh, Sanskrit and Hindi because hadn't studied it for a long time. Sanskrit, I couldn't make out a word. And fortunately, by the time I entered the 10th standard, my mother was back, my parents were back, and my mom really saved me because I had given up on Hindi and I had started mugging up. And then I suddenly discovered that, if you read Kabir ke Dohe and Tulsi ki Chaupaiyan, you can actually see that it's nothing but an older version of Hindi, and you can actually make sense of it. So the best part of it is I again used my strength of, how and why. And so today, even if you ask me Sandhi, Samas, Anupras, Alankar, Atishokti, Alankar, I remember all of them simply because I understood what they were about. So Anupras Alankar is equal to what you would call alliteration in English. And that's how I would try and understand them.
Very interesting, Manish. And, I suddenly realized that there are two other common factors for us. One that even I and my parents belong from UP. So I don't know which towns were your parents were from.
One of my parents, my father belongs to Raebareli,
Hmm.
the hotbed of politics these days.
Yes,
My
yes.
mother belongs to Kumaon.
Ah, okay. So I was from three places: Unnao, Kannauj, and Lucknow.
Very
So
familiar with all of them. I've lived and worked in Lucknow as well.
yes, and the other common factor, Manish, is that even I'm from St. Xavier's, Delhi.
Oh, okay. We
So
must catch up on all of that then.
we have to. And you reminded me of that mental maths. which used to happen. And if you recall, and I'm sure you would have many of those, you used to get this certificate called Mighty in Maths.
Oh yes, oh yes. And
Yes.
there were these Xavier's badges if you stood first or
Oh,
fifth. I
yes.
have some
Yes.
silver
Yes.
and some gold ones.
Yes.
And
Yes.
by the way, I was reciting our school anthem to somebody, and they were
Mhm.
shocked that I remembered an anthem that I would have last heard in 1978.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, even outside of this podcast, we have a lot to catch up on, and it'll be really, really nice to do that. But some of the stuff that you mentioned was phenomenal because during the schooling days, even I remember, and you do mention that there was a lot of application-based, education which was there,
True.
and that you were forced to think, sort of a thing, and that is, I can really, really see that something like that actually lasts the longest. Road never does. Road is very, very short-lived and etc. However, I mean, just the fact that you actually went through and understood the Dohe and everything, that you can still recall them. And that is the real learning, and that is the real education, and etc. And I mean, we would definitely love to talk a little bit more about it when we go to, what's the form of education which is there today. But this is something which strikes me as very, very, impactful. That forced to think and the application-based learning has the longest impact on anyone. The other thing which I wanted to ask you was that, I'm sure, and I'm really talking about prior to you did mention about a few, that there are many milestones during a journey of anybody, right? And those milestones is something that you actually always remember. And I'm sure you must have had a few milestones in your life. Would love to hear about a couple of them and how they changed or impacted your life and where you are today. Would be fantastic to hear those.
So I think one of them I've already talked about, uh, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit more. While I was abroad, and my interest in natural sciences and science comes from there. I still recall watching a movie, Superman. We got to watch very few movies. This is the original movie in the late 70s. And in that movie, he travels faster than light, and time moves backwards. And I remember going up to my physics teacher a few days later and asking him, how did he do that? And then, you know, I think my teacher, uh, the fact that I pestered him, it made him realize I was interested, and he sat back after class one day and explained in very rudimentary science the concept of relativity. And of course, it was done in a very, very basic manner, and I understood that. And the thought to me was wow. And then I got interested in astronomy, uh, astrophysics, etc., and and science as a whole. And I think my passion for science really grew more and more exponentially, if I may, from there. And so when I came back, I to India in the 10th grade, I of course struggled because you had exams and you had to give the exam for ninth and 10th together at that point in time.
Mm.
And then I think the choice of what subjects or what disciplines I needed to take became a little obvious, that I would want to take science. I was studying in a central school. My father really wanted me to go to a good school if I really wanted to study science. So I ended up at DPS Arkepuram. And the second milestone came when uh, summer holidays went away for the after the 11th grade, and this is well after the 12th grade has started. And I came back, and 2 weeks into the class, it would have been July, sometime around now, uh, of the 12th grade, and I saw some kids in my class reading some notes. And I asked one of them, what is this? And he says, these are Agarwal's classes, notes for JE. And I remember asking, what is JEE? And the guy stared at me and then he very patiently explained. And then I asked, what is IIT? And, so the problem was I came from a government service background where nobody had the concept of science, nobody really focused on corporate life. And then I realized that if everybody in my class, or at least some of my best friends, are doing this, then I must do this as well.
Right.
And so I was always very competitive in my heart. So I got myself Agarwal's classes notes, started preparing more because I just wanted to be the best. It was
Mhm.
less with the objective of actually getting into IIT, more with the objective of being able to prove to myself that I was better than them. Uh, Somehow, competitiveness has always been in my DNA. And uh, I was fortunate, managed to get through. And uh, after a lot of disbelief, my parents finally realized that yes, I have made it to IIT and managed to get through. Studied engineering at IIT Delhi. So the that entire 12th grade, or 9 months of 12th grade, from becoming aware of JEE to be able to actually crack it, was a huge period of testing for me, where I could prove to myself that if I work hard, I can do anything. And hard work was always something I was used to, but you know, uh, being able to test myself, and mind you, DPS tests you against the best, because there were people who came who had in CBSC been ranked first, second, third. Literally, those are the kind of people you were studying with. And once you compete with them and you're able to do as well as them, then you know that you're doing something right. So
Oh, great.
getting
I mean,
or the
yeah, sorry.
experience of getting through was a great one.
Yeah, and of course, I've taken a look at your profile, and not only the IIT Delhi, then you cracked the IIMs as well, right? And and you know that there are lakhs and lakhs of children who are actually forever hoping for a combination like that. That IIT and IIM seems like the ultimate of education as far as India is concerned. Uh, yes, you did talk about the force to think as your mantra and understanding this subject rather than the rote learning as your mantra for understanding and the long-term impact of something like that. Um, I would still like to understand, and for many of the others, that if you have to crack a combination like that, which is IIT and IIM, right? Uh, what else can you really tell them that this is how you really went about cracking some of the most prestigious exams of the country?
So I think there is, honestly speaking, there is no shortcut. Hard work and discipline are two things that perhaps right from childhood were ingrained into me. Discipline is something where at times I may go overboard. I insist on discipline within my organization. I was a reasonably disciplined child right from childhood. Uh, I don't, for example, remember even missing the school bus except for once, and managed to still catch it on the way. So, uh, somewhere that discipline and hard work, and along with that discipline came a passion for learning. And so when I joined the dots, I realized that I would really, really be curious. I really wanted to understand how this happens, even if it was history. So, history may sound boring, but, mind you, when I was studying abroad, uh, I still remember doing a 1 month project on the Russian invasion of Afghanistan. Russia had invaded Afghanistan in 1979, if I remember correctly. And we had to read the newspaper articles on the Russian invasion and actually summarize that in the form of how would you report it if you were Russia, and how would you report it if you were Afghan. And then at the end of 1 month, we were to look at it with the stark difference and understand that history can always be tweaked depending on who's reporting it. And and that's how, so we were not just taught history, we were also taught about how history is created, how history is made. uh, if I was learning French, it was not just the French language. I I've done the entire 3-year course of Alliance Française as well. But that aside, I learned enough about French wines and French cheese and French culture and the geography of France. So it would really be interesting. So somewhere that passion to understand and satisfy my curiosity led to taking interest, and that interest would bring a lot of focus. I still believe that I can focus for hours and hours. I have at times forgotten to take a bath and realized that it's 6 in the evening during a weekend, just because I was focusing on something. So I think these have been some of the strengths, but I think curiosity and a desire and hard work, these three things have always helped.
No, I think that's really, really insightful, Manish, because a lot of people do talk about hard work, right? And everybody says that there is no shortcut, and you have to go through the whole rigorous, the entire process of, the entire thing. But I think what I really see very interesting is the passion for learning, as you mentioned, right? And the curiosity factor
True.
that in addition to the hard work and the discipline that you talked about, right, makes the let's say the delta difference. Because there would be a whole lot of people who would say that I worked so hard, I studied the entire night, and I did not even eat, and I did not even sleep, and I was, just studying, studying, and studying, right? But somehow they were still not able to crack, and that leads to a lot of frustration.
The what keeps pushing you has to be inspiration, or some kind of passion that
Correct.
has to come from within. Either
Yes.
it should be, you're seeing success. People can do well because of multiple reasons. You are motivated by a goal, or you are motivated by the process. I used to be motivated more by the process.
Hmm. So, I mean, if you, if I really look at it from a different lens, I would say that if you have that passion and if you have that curiosity for learning and if you have that inspiration, right, the hard work and discipline automatically comes,
You're
right?
probably right. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can't force yourself to work hard. You can't force yourself to get the discipline, because if you are passionate about something, and see some of the top achievers or whatever, they have always talked about that there would be some inspiration, that there would be some passion, and there would be some curiosity, which actually made them just continue to work, and they would not even realize it. Like you just now said that you would forget to take bath, right? It was not that you had consciously decided to work hard. No, it was actually because you were so passionate and you were so curious.
Sometimes you can just shut the world out because you're enjoying the process of learning something.
Yes, the whole process of learning. Brilliant. I mean, Manish, that's really, really insightful for anybody, actually, for that matter. Now, let me come to, the phase post your education.
Yeah.
For many people, the job is the real, end goal for, of their education, literally. That why are you getting educated and why are you going through the whole education process? Because I want to land for the job, right? And did you also, when you landed the first job, because that first job is one of the most exciting parts, right? Because you are one entering into a different phase of life. That's one part. And the other is that you're actually, that's the end of your education part. You're getting into a job. There is something new that you will be doing from here on onwards. So, was your first job was also somewhat as exciting? And what were your feelings of your first job?
So there are two answers to that question, probably. Between my engineering and MBA, I probably decided that engineering was not going to be sufficient very late. And it was an elective subject that I did during the last year of engineering in marketing, which actually, again, made me aware that there's something called marketing. And I found it intriguing. And I said, then I must prepare for whatever will take me to the best institute for marketing. And that's how I ended up giving the CAT. But that meant that I had to spend a year working and preparing. It was a tough journey. I worked with a chemical engineering company. I am a chemical engineer called VAM Organic Chemicals. Today, they go by the name Jubilant. Uh, at that time, their name was VAM Organics, and they had a factory uh, about 100 kilometers from Delhi at Gajrala. So it was a tough 1 year where, literally twice a week going on a roadways bus to the factory and back, sometimes even standing, you were still reading your notes and trying to prepare. That was a tough 1 year. But the real first job was after I finished my MBA. I would have done something good during my summer internship. I did my summer internship with Godrej in the consumer durables division, or office equipment division, as they call it. And so, post finishing my master's in business administration, they picked me up, and I was happy that I was offered, or rather picked by them, to work in exactly the area where I had done my summer internship. And the good thing that happened is I we got the best, I would say, the best timing in terms of joining the industry just post liberalization. The liberalization of the country happened. The doors of the economy were opening up. Multinationals were coming in. So when I joined Godrej, if you've been to any public sector office or a government office, you still see a lot of steel tables and steel chairs with cane and all. Those are all Godrej. But I did my summer training in a partition system, a kind of flexible system that they were creating. And the moment I joined them, I could see the potential for this to be sold to multinationals who wanted the flexibility of expanding as their business expanded. So I was lucky to join the organization at the right time. And within the learning that I got, of course, I got to learn a lot. Learning how to sell, learning how to negotiate, learning to plan, learning to hustle, run around, get sales numbers, uh, negotiate with customers for payment. Mind you, I've negotiated with Mr. Sunil Mittal before he was anybody. I actually sat across the table and got he
Interesting.
wrote down a check for 20 lakhs and gave it to myself and my boss.
Very interesting.
Very pleasant memory. But when you run around for 4 years and do some of these things, they stay with you because you've dirtied your hands actually doing that.
Yeah. And of course, I understand that you ultimately joined his organization as well.
That
Ultimately,
was
so
a
yeah, yes,
pleasant
much
stroke of
later.
fortune. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. So we'll come to that. In fact, I had
Sure,
some questions around your career path as well, and
sure.
but we'll come to that. However, the next part is that one of the biggest teacher, and as anybody says, is failures. Right, that's the biggest teacher. And of course, when we hear your journey, it's so marked with so many successes and some brilliant educational lineage that you have. But I'm sure there must have been failures. It's
Lots
their
of
part
them.
in everybody's
And
life. Yeah.
lots.
So tell us about a couple, or maybe one most impactful one, which taught you the most, and what did it teach you?
So let me talk about two or three of them. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
One was from Godrej, I realized that, and I'll quickly come to that point by saying that I moved from Godrej to Honda Cars 96, and I was one of the early team members. And during the time that I was with Honda, in the initial couple of years when they were still in their project phase, got to do everything because we were a very small team. I was part of the marketing team, understood how dealer development happens, actually was part of the team that selected the first dealers, got the car launched, uh, However, there came a point in time just after the car launch that I was moved from dealer development and sales as head of training. And to my mind, it was like a demotion because I wanted to be in sales and marketing. And here, the head of training had come down from Japan. And after 6 months of training to everybody, for some reason, I was the one who was told that you have to head training. And I kept asking myself, why? What did I do wrong? And it was at a much later point in time that I understood that there was nobody else within the organization who actually had understood how a car works and how a car is to be sold, and join the dots so that you can actually teach all the sales employees of all your dealers across the country on the technical part of selling a car and the sales part of selling a car.
Mm, mm, mm.
And of course, that worked very well for me. And then after a certain stint in training, I was back in a larger role in the mainstream sales and marketing. So
No, interesting. Yeah.
somewhere, I could have, there was a point in time when this happened, and I still remember for a week I was in absolute shock. The learning for me was that sometimes you just have to make the best of what's given to you. If life throws lemons at you, etc., etc. But I would have done something well in that sales training stint as well, because they continued with me, they stayed with me, and then gave me an even larger role. And I was put in charge of marketing, uh, managed to launch the City VTech, was fully put in charge of the Accord, and managed to launch the Accord as well. So some big successes there.
Sure. No, in fact, that gets me to the next question, which, so across your career, I have seen the way that you have moved from Godrej to Honda Cars to Airtel to Tata Motors, Hero Cycles,
Yeah.
Metro Cash, Ampersand Group of Schools, and now Zeal, right? Now, that's a pretty, if anybody outside, sitting outside, would look at that career path, I mean, it'll look like that you were confused, right? You never knew what you wanted to do in life. And after such a fantastic, beginning where you had the best of education, you were simply jumping ships, right?
Okay.
But I can really, I'm 100% sure that, there is this one thread which actually binds all of them. It's nothing to do with what product that you were selling or what company and what sector or what industry, and those might be different industries and etc. But I'm quite sure that there is this one thread which ties all of them together. And I would really love to see that and understand that invisible thread which nobody is able to see.
So I think there are two things that join all of these, and that is that original curiosity. Somehow, after I spend enough time in an organization, I keep, every day when I'm driving back home or being driven back home, I always reflect back and ask myself, what did I learn today? And the day that answer starts reducing in terms of what I learned today, I know either I need to do something more in the same organization to learn more, or I need to start looking. I have this huge desire to and curiosity to keep learning. And there was a point in time in Honda, the biggest high for me was the launch of the Accord. It took more than 6 months of planning. It got launched in 2001. And by the time the financial year ended, I was asking myself, unless I get something bigger than this, it's not as if I will stop learning. Now, Honda is such a huge organization, you'll continue to learn. But there is an inflection point beyond which somewhere I feel there's more to do. So that's one thing that always keeps driving me. And even today, I may be in education, but I keep looking at 20 other industries and keep asking myself, "Ye kaise hota hai? How does this happen?" And I wish I could spend more time trying to understand how, let's say, investment banking works. Today I was watching a YouTube video, just trying to think to myself about that. But so that is one thing that keeps driving me. The other is industries themselves go through growth cycles. So when I joined the car industry, Esteem had already been a high selling car. CLO had just been launched. And when I came across the opportunity at Honda, uh, it was not as if Honda fell into my lap. It was multiple things that came together. And I asked myself, wouldn't this be a great industry to join, simply because there's a lot that's happening in the car industry? It seems to be all set for an exponential growth. When I was deliberately wanting to exit Honda in 2002, I remember actually speaking both to Vodafone and Airtel, evaluating both offers. And of course, at that time, Vodafone was known as SR.
Mm.
And evaluating both the offers, and in spite of the fact that Airtel was a company which was a first generation entrepreneurship, somewhere I could see the difference between the way it approached business versus all the other 15, 20 companies in India which were approaching business. And I said, telecom is not only a great sector, Bharti will be a great company to hedge my bets on. So that's what took me to Bharti. And maybe that's how I later moved to retail. Of course, the education bug had bitten me even before I moved into retail. Sometime in 2011, when I was wanting to get out of telecom was slowing down due to the 2G scam. I remember having long conversations face to face with Shantanu Prakash at Educom.
Mhm.
I was very keen on getting into the education sector. Somehow things didn't materialize, and uh, I don't regret for a moment that I couldn't join them at that point of time, because Tata Motors was a great company to work for. But then when I got the next opportunity, I think I came with more wisdom of having learned a lot of strategy both at Tata Motors and at Metro Cash and Carry, where in both of these places I was heading strategy. So as a CEO, when I entered the education sector at Vidgyar, uh, I think my ability to think strategically, apart from having operational understanding of sales, marketing, finance, was
Mm.
a little better.
Fantastic. I mean, I can completely understand, that level of curiosity which you have, and right from as a child that you have had that, it was part of your education, etc. Somewhere, I have a very similar lineage
Okay.
that not only from the professional side, but even as an entrepreneur, right? Many people would call me a rolling stone, right? But I know that I have been gathering moss, and I know that I had that one linkage which is there across all, and I am a problem solver, right? When I see a problem somewhere and it's an interesting problem and it catches my attention and etc., I would like to look at technology, how technology can solve. So I'm a big, big fan of tech. And I basically feel that there's a whole lot of stuff which actually tech can solve as problems. So, and this is a realization that I had much later, not right from the very beginning, right? Much, much later that, I love solving problems and I love finding solutions to problems, and primarily helped by tech and etc. So I can completely understand that where you come from, and that curiosity factor actually led you to so many industries and so many verticals. It's actually a very enriching experience. I can completely relate with what you would feel today, while you are going across so many industries and so many sectors, and you have that understanding and you have that knowledge, deep knowledge of those sectors. That's actually actually very really brilliant. Now, one thing that I want to ask you, I have asked you about your failures. I've asked you about your, that what joins all the dots across so many sectors and etc. One thing that they must have been that moment of pride in your life, right? That which you hold above everything else, right? Now, whether it is a personal moment of pride or it's a professional moment of pride, but there must be something which actually you feel extremely proud of yourself. And that is one thing that I would like to understand, that from within your own perspective, I'm sure your parents have a different sense of pride looking at you. Your family, your wife, your everybody has a different sense of pride looking at you, and etc. But when you look at yourself, there must be a moment of pride or something which actually you hold, that, oh, this is something that I did really good. I mean, I worked hard, I did this, and I achieved this.
So if I were to look at my entire life, I would say, in spite of my entire focus being towards my career, just being able to stay married to my wife was perhaps the biggest thing I should be proud of. But jokes apart, uh, there have been a huge number of moments of pride or moments of achievement uh, that have really made me, feel that, wow, I've done something good. One was, of course, I mentioned to you, getting through JE. I didn't realize, honestly, at that time how big it was.
How big
Uh,
it was.
and maybe therefore getting through into the, into the IIMs was, by that time, my awareness of what IIM is about was a little better because I had entered the corporate world. It was a little bit more. But two, three things that I really felt proud about. One was in Airtel achieving a very, very specific target, which, I was put in charge of what was known as a service marketing team. I held six different responsibilities during my 10-year career at Airtel. In one of them, I was heading services marketing, and I had this team of 30 ladies reporting to me whose job was uh, to retain customers who were leaving because they had higher empowerments. I thought that was one of the best times that I had in my career. But when I first realized that there will be 30 ladies reporting to me, I was really taken aback. I remember writing a mail to my sister, who happens to be a psychologist in the US, and asking her, what do I do? I was in a panic. Of course, she told me that you give them flexibility, give them space. They will always be more loyal and they will always deliver. And that over a 2-year period proved true again and again and again. And that team was so loyal to me that I won during those 2 years every award under the sun that I could think of. The company sent me and my wife to Switzerland on a holiday as an award, went to Austria, went to Amsterdam, got cash awards, won an iPod, everything that you can think of. But just that, uh, the way that team worked with me, the way they actually rallied around me to deliver whatever I would ask of them was an amazing experience. Second big one was in Metro Cash and Carry. The as a strategy head, my biggest challenge I was that was given to me was the company had been around for 11 years,
Mhm.
started in 2003 or 4, if I remember correctly, and 2014 when I took over. I was told that the company has been making losses for the last 11 years. Our head office has stopped funding us, and we need to create a strategy so that they'll give us funds and they'll approve our strategy. And it took the better part of 1 full year to brainstorm and work with the senior management to come upon a strategy that actually worked. And the head office was convinced and they agreed to fund us. The only thing they said is, whatever you're saying you will do in the next 3 years, you have to do it in 2 years. And so we came back, and the MD told me, this is the critical new function that we are creating. You're going to have to run it. So forget about strategy. Now you have to actually execute.
Mm.
And so from 2016 to 18, we were actually executing that strategy, and uh, feel very proud of the fact that we actually broke even. So I was part of the team that created that strategy and actually executed that strategy. Of course, things changed a lot during those 4 years, but we still managed to deliver on the result. So
Mm, that's
to be
that's
extremely
that's
proud.
fantastic. I can completely understand the high that you would have felt in all of these moments of achieving something which was a big challenge. But then when you achieve that, it makes a big difference confidence, your personality, and basically your learning as well. Now, Manish, just coming to something which is passion for both of us now, which is
Yeah.
the whole education sector, right? And would just like you to reflect that what are the kind of changes that you see in education as compared to 10 years back or over a period of the last 10 years? What is that some of the biggest changes that you see in education?
So we know that the new education policy is here. We know that there is a new curriculum being changed. But what is important is what's happening in the environment. The Prime Minister is talking about Viksit Bharat by 2047. What do we mean by Viksit Bharat? And what does it mean for today's students? It's very important to understand that a 5-year-old child, who's going into the first grade, by the time he spends 12 more years passing out, 3 more years of college, maybe a couple of years of MBA, 2 decades later, in 2044, when he hits the job market, he cannot be you know taught today formulae and written uh, written down rules on how to solve problems. He can only be armed with the how to solve a problem. So it's extremely important that we teach our children to think. We throw out the what out of the window and force them to think why and how. And I'm again coming back to my own learnings and my own uh, education.
Yes.
If we don't, and by the way, we are living in a VUCA world. It's changing so fast that, the changes that would have happened in the last century from 1920s to now, uh, the kind of change that's going to happen in the next 10 years, thanks to digitization, thanks to globalization, thanks to the net, the sharing of information and networking, is going to accelerate change at such a pace that whatever a child learns, even in and passes out with in 2044, 5 years later, he will have to come back and re-educate himself. That era which we were born in, that you pass out of college and you've learned everything, and then you go out and execute. That era is gone. Children will have to keep teaching themselves again and again and again. So the 2 points that I see change are: one, more and more children have to be armed to learn how to solve problems, and the other is learning to continuously educate themselves.
Uh, Basically, be never give up education. Don't
Lifelong
think that you're
learning,
for.
lifelong learning.
Yeah, correct. So basically shift from education to learning, that your formal education kind of everybody feels is now over, but your learning actually never gets over, and that continues for entire life. um, so education per se, there is a lot of digital transformation which is happening in education now, right? How do you see basically these digital transformations influence the future of learning?
So, strictly speaking, if I were to ask you a rhetorical question, what is the best way for a child to learn? The answer is, today, the way teaching is happening is completely wrong, because there is one teacher who's teaching probably about 40 children. If you are lucky to be in an expensive school, maybe 1 is to 25 children. But the teacher is assuming that everybody knows the same things, everybody's got the same background, and everybody is at the same level. The ideal way in which learning has to happen is 1 is to 1.
Correct.
uh, which takes us back to the Guru Shishya Parampara of the Gurukul period. But coming back to today, if most of us are not going to be able to afford that 1 is to X ratio, which is good enough for us to be able to get individualized attention, then the only other way, and perhaps it's a boon in a sense, is use technology. And with the advent of AI, I see one of the biggest levers which is emerging in the horizon is, how AI can adapt itself to every student's needs, see the pace at which he is learning, see what he is not good at, and accordingly uh, change the pace of learning so that technology, whether it's a combination of, uh, you know, I can see at least half a dozen technologies having a big role to play. AI, online is already there, came in through COVID. I can see AR, VR coming in. So, education will move from instructive to immersive to being more interactive.
Mm.
And these three or four technologies will have a much, much bigger role to play uh, for meaningful education.
So basically, like you said, that from an AI perspective, people are really scared of AI, and they
True.
feel that AI is going to take away jobs and roles, and is going to take away the human need in many of the jobs, and etc. And which is where some of the examples which actually come up, that when the computers were first time introduced, right, and it was just coming in, that the machines will do the jobs much faster, some basic job that humans took much longer. And there was a similar fear that now the computers will come in and they will take away jobs of humans, and many of these. But what we really saw, that computers actually came in as a tool for the mankind to really do those jobs
True.
much more
We
efficiently.
today do higher order jobs.
Yes, today we do higher order jobs, which is where AI is also going to be, right?
Absolutely.
That it is, because AI ultimately is still artificial. Real intelligence lies with the mankind, with humans, with people like us, and etc. And AI will become only smarter. It'll always be, dependent on how the human learning is actually making it adaptive, and etc. So, which is where, like you rightly said, that if AI in education can now customize to every individual, right? And whether it is the pace, whether it is how to learn, and etc., you know, be far more adaptive. That is where AI can really transform online education from that perspective. What do you think of? So, I know that you Z Learn has a lot of physical schools, classrooms, and etc. What are your thoughts on full online education ecosystem? Do you think that is a possibility? Do you think, because today there are a lot of online universities which are coming up. Today there are a lot of schools which are purely online, and etc., and they have no physical classrooms and whatever. Where do you see that is heading?
So, if I look at the spectrum of 2 years to 18 years for a child who goes through pre-primary, primary, middle, and secondary, senior secondary education, we need to keep in mind that every student has a certain level of maturity, has a certain level of understanding of the medium. So I don't want to name any companies, but there are companies who've gone into edtech and failed. But why are we surprised? Do we believe that a child who's 5 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old will have the patience? You and I are having a 1 hour conversation. Do you think a child will be able to sit in front of a laptop for an hour without needing monitoring? No, he will not. So there is an age for everything. There is an age at which online education will start making sense. And there will be an age when the child is mature enough to himself move towards it. So as a child, who's 5 to 8 versus a child who's 15 to 18, a child who's 15 to 18 will have far more maturity to understand that this education which is happening online is there for a reason, because I have to pass an exam and ultimately this is what is going to lead me to an end goal. And a student who's 25 to 28 who may be undergoing executive education will have even more motivation because he's probably paying for that education himself. So there is a change that happens with age, which makes online education more meaningful as we go from a small child to a teenager to a youth. That's my belief.
Interesting. So basically, you're saying that there is a certain level of maturity that you require uh, before you actually are able to take the best out of online education, and it would. What do you think are the biggest advantages of online education?
Oh, lots of them. Uh, See, one of the things we forget is as the education sector, we still did reasonably well during COVID. It's easy to flog ourselves and say that, uh, COVID caused the doom of education, but that's not true. I was working for an organization with your group of schools, and I'm extremely proud of what they did during the immediate break that happened. The 2 months of lockdown that happened, they revamped their entire curriculum, and you know the online medium has strengths which offline does not have. Sitting in a classroom, you cannot show a video of how the solar system works. There are certain things that need uh, to be shown in another medium to be for the child to be able to understand it. And a solar system is just an example. If I want to teach the child how the heart pumps blood across the body, I'm pretty sure it's easier to do in an online medium than it is to do on a blackboard, and in real life something like that may not be possible at all.
So now there are basically smart classrooms, right,
Sure.
which are all internet connected and etc. And there
Yes.
also, it is possible for the teacher to really show demonstrative videos and stuff like that.
True.
But when we really talk about online education, it is basically outside of a premises, right?
Yes.
Do you feel that that has its own inherent advantages as of today? That it is a not a centralized but a decentralized way of education.
So that's an interesting question. There are advantages and disadvantages. The biggest advantage is that you make very good use of the real estate of the school. You improve the capacity utilization, if I look at it from a
Right.
school's point of view.
Yes.
And I'm talking purely wearing a business hat right now. So
Yes.
if I were running a school, I would put much more of my capacity towards the junior classes where physical education is required. For the senior classes, I may have a higher ratio of online where the child is sitting at home. But when the child is sitting at home, keep in mind that my laptop or my mobile is perhaps occupying only a certain part of my entire attention.
Yes.
If my attention is 360 degrees, if there's somebody moving outside the room or music playing elsewhere and I can hear children in the playground, all that can become a distraction. But at the same time, uh, the fact is, sitting at home means there is a lot more efficiency that comes in terms of travel time being saved, uh, space being saved, like I already did. So there are pros and cons of it, and uh, benefits will work both ways.
So, which would mean that, and that is what I'm hearing from a few educators that the answer is not either this or that, right? The
No,
answer actually lies somewhere in the hybrid format, that you take the
absolutely.
best of both the worlds to
Absolutely.
really create an education ecosystem which will really, really empower the children and in multiple ways and etc. Right? So, that is one part. Now that gets me to the other facet of online education, and that's going to be my last question for the day, which is online examinations, right? Now,
Proctoring.
if you the proctoring and the online examinations and etc. Now you remember that when COVID was there and children were really happy that the examinations were online, right? And purely for one reason, that they felt that they will be able to cheat and be able to copy and etc. or whatever. And because it is an online examination, it is easier to really do that. And we saw that the completely illogical marks were there, and literally everybody was scoring the top marks and etc. whatever. And unfortunately, during those 2 years, because of the online examinations and online assessments and etc., a lot of professional institutes suffered also because those batches were called as COVID batches, right?
True.
And it was difficult for them to really get jobs because people felt that because they were online examinations, online assessments, which were not credible and secure, hence the child did not go through the learning process, and hence there was no education, real education, which happened in those 2 years, right? And that is how a lot of these professional institutes actually suffered from that perspective. What is the first thought which comes to your mind when you think of online assessments? And whether do you think that there is any use case of online assessments in a school, college, professional institute, or even otherwise?
So like I said, I was working with, with Gear at that point of time. We did need proctoring. We took the help of an external organization outside India, but we struggled because uh, in India, nothing was available. And even though we took help from a company outside India, we were never really certain how effective they were.
Mm. So that actually made the online assessments insecure, right? And
Yeah, there was
lacked
always a
credibility.
doubt. There was always a doubt.
Yes. But if you think that there is a possibility of bringing in a secure platform, right, for online assessments, do you think that there is a usage of something like that? And
More than
to some
ever.
of
I
the areas?
mean, uh, I'm just thinking about the scam that has recently broken out.
Yes. Yes.
Uh, if online exams happened and a great proctoring system was available, why would such an issue happen?
No, you're absolutely correct, because that is what something which drives me and motivates me. That a human proctor kind of has inconsistencies, because one proctor would be very strict, the other may not be that strict, and we have seen that even the invigilators helping students in cheating and etc.
True,
While
true.
technology is absolutely consistent, right? It will look at every child in exactly the same way, wherever the child might actually be sitting,
True.
etc. That is the biggest advantage that technology brings. And that is where the whole online, because today, and I can actually specifically talk about, the company that I run today, is to actually bring in an absolutely secure online assessment platform. And that somehow we have seen the use cases across universities and institutes and etc. Because now universities are using these online secure platforms to conduct their own scholarship exams, right?
Wow.
And for providing scholarship, you have to be absolutely certain that the child did not
There's
cheat.
huge money
And
at stake, and
yes,
not
huge,
just results.
exactly,
There's money associated with
absolutely.
the result.
That is one. The second is, even in one of the places, which is, let's say, the tutorial services, tutorial institutes, right? People felt that it should be the child's own motivation of not cheating, because you have come here, you have paid huge amounts of money and etc. Sure, it should be your own motivation not to cheat during practice exams. But we have seen that that still continues to happen, right? And that is where some of the leading tutorial services providers are actually incorporating these online examinations with these online proctoring, which are secure, basically to instill into a child that you may cheat today, right? But when the actual examination happens, you will not have that opportunity. So it is better that you start getting the habit of not cheating and understanding that where you really stand, your strengths and weaknesses, so that you can improve on those weaknesses. So that when the day of the actual exam come, when you will have no opportunity to cheat, right? At that point in time, at least you would have practiced truly, and etc.
So I'm just going a step ahead and actually curious to understand this. I assume that this kind of a solution is available when somebody is sitting at a laptop and giving an exam. I am
So whether it's a laptop, mobile, or a tab.
okay. I am going one step further. As you
Hmm.
are aware, we not only run the largest chain of preschools, more than 2,000 of them under the brand name Kidsy. ZLearn also runs a huge chain of more than 100 schools by the name of Mount Litera Z schools across the country. And every single school falls under the CBSE board, and therefore you have cameras in every classroom. Do you foresee a possibility of your proctoring system being in some way integrated with these IP run cameras? Because if that could happen at some point in time, wouldn't that be wonderful?
So you would be, really excited to learn that that is exactly what we do, right?
Oh,
And we have already got that technology
okay.
where with these, if we are able to get the feed, those video feeds and
Sure.
etc. It is not that you are monitoring and somebody is monitoring the entire class and seeing or whatever, and that there is human intervention which is there. We actually monitor every individual inside the class. And the technology is actually monitoring the movements of every individual inside that class, right? And we can generate a report for every individual inside that class. Even as much
Oh,
as that, if we have the right data from you, then we can even identify impersonations, right?
okay.
That suppose there is someone else sitting in that
Got
person's
it. Got
chair
it.
and taking the exam or whatever, and etc. So this I mean, I would love to come and show you that, do a small, take you through a small demo and a video that we have, where it will demonstrate to you that by just putting two cameras, and we generally restrict two cameras to 20 students. So if there
Mhm.
are more than 20 students in the class, then we generally prefer to have one more camera. But two cameras are enough for monitoring 20 kids inside a classroom individually, right? And this also helps in invigilating the invigilator who is
Yes.
present in the classroom, right? So there is a great analysis which can be provided on the performance of the invigilator
Yeah.
also during the class and etc. So yeah, I mean that technology is what we have today. It's a brilliant technology that our
Wonderful.
team has
Would
been able
love
to
to hear more
develop.
about it.
Yes, yes, we will do that. And I mean, Manish, back to our conversation. It was a great, great conversation. With
Thanks.
the
Thanks,
kind of
Abhijit.
varied
Thanks,
experience
Abhijit.
that you have had, it's great insights that we got today. And like I told you earlier, that I really love hearing stories. And it was a great story of yours that I could hear today. And it's always a learning for me as well. The learning never stops. So I learn from your stories and I learn from your experiences, both the failures and the successes and etc. And it's always just brilliant to really do that. So thank you so much, Manish, for everything and giving us the insights and very, very deep and open insights you gave us that
Thank you.
you
It was a pleasure
speak
speaking to you as ever.
so frankly and so openly about. Yes, yes, Manish, same here. And we will, of course, plan to catch up. There is so many common elements that we really would be lovely to, catch up with you and
True.
discuss a whole lot more. Yeah. So
Thank you.
thank you
Thank you
so
for the
much.
opportunity.